313, which was the highway naming bill. Most of those all happened. We had a bill out there that we passed, the Senate 24-12, and it was dealing with autonomous vehicles. It was Senate Bill 546. What your thoughts is of 546? I think you had a hearing, but I don't know that you got to hear it on.
Thank you, Senator. We had a hearing in committee and didn't have time, honestly, to work the bill without, it needed to set over a day before we'd work it. And so we didn't have the opportunity to work it on the House floor. But I think this is an important topic that we need to address this year.
I know Oklahoma just passed their bill just this morning, trying to get it through. They're trying to attract some businesses and trying to get it going. Just wondering what your thoughts were. The two bills that we had that were hanging out there, this one was probably the one that was going to bring the most business in, that we would hope. What's your thoughts on it? How'd your hearings go?
There were a number of questions, when we heard the bill. But I think, my thought is, if we can go ahead and work this in conference committee, it's not like we're going to have something just come in and start tomorrow on this particular issue. I think we'll have plenty of time if we need to come back next year and make some adjustments to it. It's kind of like with the transportation plan, the Eisenhower legacy plan. We passed that. We came back the following year and made some adjustments that needed to be done. And I feel like this is one that we could do that too. At this point, I'm not sure how many states don't have anything on the books, but we're one of the very few. At the last I knew, I think there were 8 states that had nothing on the books on autonomous vehicles, and we were one of them. Obviously, Oklahoma has passed one, and I'm not sure there hasn't been another one passed prior to that. So I'm feeling we need to move forward. I do have, if we do work on this, I do have an amendment that I would want to pass out and have Chris talk about.
Be willing to look at that. When we sent it over to you, it came to our committee late too, because we had a different bill that we started out with, and it had a lot of opposition because people wanted to expand it more and more than what it was. They wanted to increase it, and we wound up with this 546. Some of the industry partners and the opponents to the original bill got together and came up with this 546. It was left with one piece in there where we left just an agency that operates 24 hours, the Department of Transportation, or an agency that operates 24 hours. That piece would probably have to be taken care of also if we want to do this bill. We were hoping that, the House would have time, but it came over real late.
I do have an amendment. I think they're going to pass that out now, and so I would ask Revisor Wagner if once it's passed out, if he would brief us on it, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee amendments start on page 2, going into page 3, by striking a portion that was added to require 24 consecutive months of a person being physically present in a driverless capable vehicle for TNC services. So that is the first change in this amendment. Going on to page 3, towards the bottom, the amendment restores some language that was stricken in committee on the Senate side for when the conventional human driver is present, expected to respond. What was crossed out was to a request to intervene when operating an ADS vehicle. This amendment would restore that language when it was changed to reasonably foreseeable that a human should respond. And going further in that paragraph, the amendment would change back, again, restore old language from the original bill. When the conventional human driver shall operate the ADS equipped vehicle according to manufacturer's requirements and specifications and shall regain manual control of the vehicle and when prompted by the automated driving system is restored in that circumstance. Page 4, again, striking provision related to TNC services and when or for how long a conventional human driver shall be required to be present. And then finally, the amendment would add another member to the advisory committee from the Foundation for Traffic Safety. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to further amend if revisers could do this and add one additional member to the group, which would be public transit.
Appears you're taking out the floor amendment that was brought in by my ranking here. I didn't know if he wanted to make any comments on that.
Comments on a short leash here. Could you explain what your thinking is about taking that 24 months out? Sorry.
And I think 12 months is adequate. That's our feeling. It's 12 months is adequate.
Mr. Chairman, can I share my thinking about that? Thank you. My intention on this in terms of the floor amendment, as I thought about this after we had, well, I had talked about it when we were in committee, but particularly this bill opens it up to taxi type services, Uber, Lyft, et cetera. And as I saw how the bill was panning out, there was no provision for the legislature to actually, once we're in this, and I think it was this 12-month trial period, if something wasn't working, there wasn't any provision for us to pass additional legislation that might protect the public. So my intent was particularly with the passenger type vehicles to give us a little bit of time. I felt like from the testimony and the presentations we had in committee, particularly the GATIC and the Walmart plan to move in a very definite prescribed route from a warehouse to a retail facility could be much safer and more predictable. And we had asked that we have a driver in that vehicle. But I got to thinking about where we might be and some of what I see as still things that need to be done in terms of autonomous passenger vehicles. And I shared that I have a Tesla, but I don't have the full self-driving. And nobody in my family trusts me. And I trust my children even less in that vehicle. And so I wanted to, I felt like we needed to have some assurance that we didn't have many more vehicles than we planned out on the roads, putting potentially the public at risk. And it gave us a chance to have those operating as autonomous or full self-driving with a passenger, but there would have to be a driver in there, and we would know better as a legislature whether that worked well. So That's why I made that amendment, and I felt like it was at least my primary obligation and that of my colleagues to protect the public. And that assured that that could be done. And if there was a problem before this became ubiquitous with many, many vehicles out there, would give us a chance to see some data and be prudent and being cautious.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, we have a variety of vehicles that operate on the road with limited human intervention today. I think that the programs that have been really vetted here through the committee process are a few good ones that allow for completely driverless vehicles, and that the next step really is to have driverless vehicles when it comes to passenger services and things like that, and that having this in there creates a burden when it comes to testing and really moving those things onto our roads. We have some of the best roads in the country. I don't think we need to be fearful of these things, and I, for one, would not want to stop any of the research that's going into some of these types of vehicular transportation on our highways, primarily because I think this is the direction that we're headed, and it does happen in other states. We aren't seeing this as we're not the pilot, we're not the first place this is happening. And I think too often we find ourselves not at the tip of the spear, not at the bleeding edge. I don't know that we want to be there, but we find ourselves constantly being left behind when it comes to these kinds of technologies and the advancements that are being made. We have universities that pride themselves on being the top in the country when it comes to autonomous vehicles. And I think we should be supportive of those things and not put too many roadblocks and obstacles in their way when it comes to the ability to have these things in Kansas as opposed to other places. The testing is going to go somewhere, and I would remind you that Kansas is one of 9 entities that won the Innovation Pilot Program to be able to have beyond line of sight flight for autonomous vehicles in the state of Kansas. That only happens under the Federal Aviation Administration in 9 locations, and we're one of them. Yet with autonomous vehicles on the ground, we somehow have this fear that they're going to come crashing into us on the highways. And I just don't think that that's going to happen. It isn't happening in the places where it's allowed today. It's not going to happen if we allow it in Kansas. So I'm very much supportive of having a regulation of those, but not a ban. I'm not willing to vote for a ban. So I would support the removal of that particular item. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could you refresh me on who else you were wanting to add besides the person from the Foundation for Traffic Safety?
Yes, a member from public transit. Public transit is growing in the state of Kansas. And Mr. Wagner, did you get my change that I wanted to make on that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I did want to clarify, are you saying you want it from would be the Kansas Public Transit Authority or the association? But yeah, we just wanted to clarify what organization.
I'll be honest, I'm not sure on that, but we need somebody from public transit that would be in association.
Okay, well, right as such.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I think we're going to be moving toward an agree to disagree, but I do have a question about when we had testimony on our side, we had issues and questions about what the liability was in the bill. It would be helpful to understand here what we believe the liability is in the bill and in the future, so that can be explained. There were some differences in that. So, general question.
We will ask.
Mr. Chairman, yes, that is correct. The liability language essentially just picks up the minimum required by any, is required under current law for drivers. But however, I know most people mention the lower amount, but that's only for vehicles, private vehicles. If there's states, the state picks up federal regulations for commercial vehicles and like that. So the number gets higher for certain vehicles. But the minimum itself is it just links to the current threshold that's in statute. But the amounts are not necessarily set at that amount, if that makes sense. I believe it starts at 750 and it goes up depending on what they're carrying. So certain items, fuels, and things like that go up. But I'd probably have to defer to someone a little more knowledgeable than me.
Minimum of 750,000 up to 2 million, as Adam said, depending on weight and cargo.
So clarification. So all of these are going to be commercial vehicles because it's the weight limits. I'm assuming you don't think so? Some of them are. Okay. And they'll hit the lower limit then.
It's a vehicle, oh dear, Mr. Whitaker will jump up if I get this wrong. 8 or more passengers, I believe, or 10,000 or more pounds.
It's a little time and research.
I'm sorry, I don't have my book with me. It's either 15 or more passengers plus the driver or 16 passengers, including the driver. I can't remember exactly which one it is the requirement under commercial motor vehicles. It makes it under the definition. There are insurance limits, and as I said, I don't have my book. If I'm a car that hauls passengers to and from, like the airport in interstate commerce, I'm gonna pay right around $5 million liability. But there are some other quirks in there, but the definition of commercial vehicles has the 16 passengers, including the driver.
It's fine.
Passengers. What is the liability limit? I think we discussed in committee $25,000, but I'm not sure about that.
As far as I know, they are the same as the minimums for current passenger vehicles.
Is that $25,000?
25, 50, 10, I think it is.
Sorry.
I'm not positive. I believe it's 25, 50, 10. Did pull up the definition in 49 CFR, and it is designed or used to transport more than 8 passengers for compensation, or is designed or used to transport more than 15, including the driver, not used to transport passengers for compensation. So it's a complicated definition. I doubt that any taxi company's insurer would let them get away with that. But
Chairman, not sure if we're looking at, I think it's likely to be the case. You have a Tesla type vehicle that's self-driving. You're an Uber. Same level as a passenger vehicle. I certainly have reservations.
You already know that I think we'll have an agree to disagree. But I know that if there is a legitimate argument to be made, if you have $25,000 possibility of liability, and that's the maximum that they have to have for a driverless vehicle, I would guess that there are people that will be opposed to that, not suggesting who, for that one single reason. If you are trying to get a bill passed, and I can't believe that anybody that runs commercial vehicles has anything less than, sounds like 750,000, but that you should have some kind of a higher limit to give this bill a little bit more buoyancy. But that's up to you, because you know where I'm going to be on this now. That's correct.
Chairman? Standing by your amendment then?
I wouldn't be opposed to, raising the limits on some insurance on that. And I don't know if we include it in this one, or if it would be another amendment, a separate amendment.
the Transportation Network Company Act requires primary automobile liability insurance in the amount of at least $50,000 for death and bodily injury per person, $100,000 for death and bodily injury per incident, and $25,000 for property damage. Now, that is while the vehicle is being used for a TNC service.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question for the revisers. When we're changing the liabilities, is it only for commercial, or is it any autonomous vehicle?
That would be discretionary to whatever agreements reached.
Okay, and then second part of that question, when we get into the autonomous vehicles, and I don't want to deviate off the liabilities because I know that's what we're talking on, but does that include, for example, GM's advertising the autopilot, which is you go buy a new pickup or something, you can get this autopilot option, and it does per what this bill describes. It will essentially guide run the vehicle by itself. So are we suddenly telling somebody with a new pickup, you now have to have 750K or $1 million in liability all of a sudden?
It gets confusing quickly, I will admit. When this issue, I believe, was raised several weeks or even a month ago, I think my one solution that we kind of helped craft on certain proposals would be that when the vehicle is operating solely as an autonomously vehicle, it would have to have those limits. That's not anything that's required. If you want to do it for all vehicles, that would be something, that would be up to your discretion. But that was just kind of my one thought on that one.
I think we had a discussion similar to what Jill had said for the transportation network companies. When it's operating as a transport network company vehicle, it had to have the higher limits on the regular vehicles. I think there was some discussion in the committee just briefly on limits. Can't recall whether it was in committee or one of the meetings I had with stakeholders or where it was at, but there was some discussion on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concern here is that, we went through this process for quite some time. We had bills and we had the parties all get together and discuss this and really work out an agreement that everyone could live with. And I even gave up some things that I thought were very important to me in order to allow for this thing to move forward so that we could get it through this legislative process. And in part of that agreement process were these limits. I am inclined to keep these things the same, just as I'm inclined to be okay with 12 months of a no work job where someone sits in a driver's seat of a vehicle that's running itself. I'm willing to cede on that, just as I think that others were willing to cede on some of the other issues so that they could get a decent bill through. But I think we would blow up this entire bill and the support that has been generated for it from the parties that have been interested in making this thing work if we start taking these pieces apart. And we've already done that on one of these that we need to now remove. And I would like to see us move down this road where we are going back to where we were with this bill originally as the parties had agreed upon it. Otherwise, I have some changes I want to make too. I would like to limit the amount of time we have those no work jobs in there. And if we're going to start going down this road where we're undoing all the progress that was made, then I'm happy to be a part of that as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Point well taken. I agree. The people got together, the parties all got together. This is a compromise and this is what, so I will stand by my amendment with the only change is that we had, the only change to the amendment was that we had the one member from the Association of the Public Transit. So that's where I would be at this point in time.
I think we'll be able to do an agree to disagree on that. The only other issue that's hanging out there was, I believe in the bill, we had the spot where we listed an agency that operates 24 hours, and we probably have to name that. Is that still out of the...
Yes, Mr. Chairman. In the original bill, it had Department of Transportation. That was removed, and I think kind of a placeholder was put in place to try and figure out an agency that would regularly, where the law enforcement plans would be submitted to and would be able to issue rules and regulations. It's essentially left undefined at this point, so we would need an agency that would be where these plans would be submitted to and who would have the rule and reg authority.
I think with the 24/7, we would like to propose to be the highway patrol. Is that?
Yeah, we just talked about that. I think they're the only agency that's has 24/7. That they're out there 24/7. So
Easy to contact.
yes, so we agree with that.
I'm sure. Well, it sounds like we've come to a point where we'll have to have an agree to disagree drafted and have our new referees appointed. What time do you guys go back in? Well, I think we're going back in at 4 too, so maybe we can.
Yes, we will have to draft an agree to disagree. The Senate, no, this Senate Bill 313, so we'll have to get the signatures on the Senate side. It'll be run on the House side first, and then it'll come back to the Senate.
That's your understanding, right, Chairman? 313 will be emptied out because I think you already have.
Just so everyone's clear, we'll have to meet again to have a formal agreement once the agree to disagree is passed by both chambers. Assuming it passes, have to reconvene a meeting to formally meet or agree to what was agreed to in this meeting.
So we'll stand by for announcements.
Okay. To the revisers, just kind of backing up to what I mentioned earlier, but on the first part of the bill where it defines the autonomous vehicle and the systems on it, but should we amend that to stipulate commercial vehicles only? Would that help clear some of this as we move this thing forward? And if not, then the question I would also have, kind of part B, if we do not go commercial vehicles only, when I turn on my autopilot in the GM vehicle, what becomes to, for example, texting laws? The vehicle's driving. Am I still not allowed to? Do I have to have hands on the wheel? Do I have to be driving the shit? Or can other things happen? I've read some interesting articles over the past week specific to this, because when we do this, it affects other statutes.
To the first point, limiting it to commercial vehicles, yes, that can be done. However, the commercial vehicles kind of takes on a connotation of, generally the understanding is a weight requirement. So you would cut out the lower weighted vehicles, so cars and things like that.
Vehicle would be your 15 plus 1 and up. You could say, like, you could go back to the solely used for Thomas, but I don't believe this definition affects those. And I don't believe it's intended to affect those lane assist and self-driving pieces. So it has to be able to complete the entire driving task. That means like pull up, park, know where it's going, and all that. And I don't believe that's the technology that they have right now. They'll assist your lane, but they don't complete the entire driving task.
And I tend to agree with what you're saying. My concern is the comment, I don't think this includes those, because we know how these statutes go once they get in. And reading it, it doesn't talk about any of that in the bill per se. It says automated driving system means the hardware or software collectively capable of performing the entire dynamic driving task on a substantial basis. And it kind of goes on. So I think it's kind of vague in the description to begin with, but that's just my opinion.
Mr. Chairman, I believe you may, Section 2 may have answered this question. These vehicles also have to take on certain, also have to be able to achieve a minimal risk condition. And this is when they're operating in a driverless capable vehicle. So I know there's kind of the hybrid where certain functions can be incorporated currently. However, Section 2 lays out additional requirements that these vehicles would have to be able to undertake to qualify. So if that provides any additional answers.
Mr. Chairman, I understand what he's saying. However, we will have ample time if we do need to make some adjustments in this at a later date. That I believe we can do that. Again, just like with the Eisenhower Transportation Plan, we were able to make some tweaks to that later, and we will be able to do that without me down the road.
Chairman. I wonder about the time to do a trailer or do some fixes. It was my understanding that we could actually start what was originally the purpose of this bill was a very specific commercial application for one business. There might be others that would decide to join it, but there was one business that at least gave testimony that was further down the road. And that was with the GATIC system. But I thought they would be in a position once this bill passed that they could start that. Is there a delay in this bill that I'm not remembering? So that I thought that
None that I see in this bill, I believe they could start and they would have to have their period of time with the driver in it.
right, so they could start.
Any of
This
the,
goes into effect July 1. They could start on July 1. If there was a problem, but I'm not sure we're totally safe. As opposed to the transportation plan, go into effect. This pilot is likely to start. Now I got to remember what I said. Well, this will go into effect before the legislature reconvenes in January, potentially. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
it's nice having one microphone. We've came to an agreement on the agree to disagree, and I think they'll get that drafted, and we'll have to find a time to meet. It'll be after we reassign, so that'll be after 4 o'clock for both chambers. We'll try and meet again tonight as soon as possible. Would you be willing to come off the floor if possible to meet if we get a time? Just because I don't think it'll take very long, just quick meeting. And I think we're completed here.